Greetings, friends. We wish to speak today about spiritual maturity on the path to enlightenment. Now, enlightenment is a concept to many people. You view it as an overcoming of the physical world, and rightfully so, you understand it to be coming to the realization that you are not the physical body, that you are one with all that is, and thus the light comes on completely, the enlightenment of your life. But few who are speaking of it really know exactly what they're talking about. And very often they will give you steps and procedures and things to do and things not to do in order to achieve enlightenment. We wish to present to you the understanding that enlightenment is something you allow. And in your allowance of it, it gradually reveals itself. Now, for some, this can happen in a flash, but for most, it is a process that takes place over time. The gradual revealing of higher, more expansive truths that you then come to embody, that then places you on a plateau from which you allow additional, higher, more expansive truths to reveal themselves, and on and on and on, always expanding into a more enlightened perspective. And you can think of this like concentric circles, like ripples in water. You toss a stone into a pond, and the ripples move out across the pond. And as you expand your awareness, you are moving out into a broader perspective that encompasses much, much more of the pond that, in the case of the enlightenment, is all that is. You expand to encompass the understanding that you are one with all that is. And yes, there are practices and things not to do, but you actually don't need to be all that rigid about it, especially at this particular time in the Earth's history. Because at this particular time and where the Earth is in the cosmos and the evolution of the Earth and the collective consciousness of humanity, which are two sides of the same coin, we'll go into the linkage between your consciousness and the consciousness of the Earth at another time. But just know right now that they are inextricably linked. And so as goes the consciousness of humanity, so goes the evolution of the Earth, the ascension into higher levels of awareness and being for the Earth and for everybody on it. It's a symbiotic relationship in an energetic sense. Now, enlightenment is more available than it has ever been. In the past, those practices, those steps that you had to take and things not to do were more important because the energy was different. The energy overall of the planet and its place in the cosmos was less expansive. But at this point in time, there's literally enlightenment being pressed down upon you. Whereas in previous times, say the monks of old, the Zen monks that you read about, and the mystics and the gurus, well, they would have to spend hours and hours and days and months and years in meditation and in the giving up of things in order to realize enlightenment. At this time, because of the work that humanity has already done, the place at which Gaia, the Earth, now enjoys, it is easier. But you have to reach a level of spiritual maturity in order to allow the perspectives, the points of view that align with enlightenment, with the understanding that you are one with all that is. So, to use an analogy, think about a child. When you are a child and you have not yet developed emotional maturity and physical maturity, and all that comes with that, such as social graces, shall we say, the understanding of how to move about in social settings and to not come across in a way that would be judged poorly by others. You learn to develop certain abilities that you don't have when you're a child. When you are, say, 5 years old and you want a piece of candy or something else, you want it immediately now, and you haven't yet developed the understanding that you can't have everything you want just now, or that it's not optimal for you to have everything you want just now, or that it may be better for you to forego that thing even though the desire to have it is strong. So, for example, a piece of candy, a chocolate. A child wants a chocolate. A child wants to gratify that desire to have a chocolate. I need it now. And if they don't get it, because they don't have the emotional maturity, well, then they may throw a bit of a fit or a tantrum about it and become rather emotional in a way that most people would judge to be negative and unpleasant. Or if they're feeling lonely, for example, then they will fixate upon that. And that may also cause tremendous emotional distress for the child. There's all sorts of examples of the child not yet having learned that you don't necessarily get everything you want right away, and that you may choose to forego certain things that you want because you come to realize it's not all that good for you to have that much of it. Chocolate is fine every now and again, but if you keep having chocolate every time you want it, well, there may be health conditions that come along with that, or emotional imbalance caused by too much sugar. So the child learns over time to self-regulate and to do what is optimal for the physical body and the emotional body, and to operate within the larger context of the social settings that the child finds itself in. Now, society, Western society, typically does not desire enlightenment that much. It doesn't value enlightenment because it hasn't been experienced by many in your cultures. There are cultures on the planet in which enlightenment and the active seeking of it is something that is quite valued. Traditionally, in Indian society, it has been, over the centuries and millennia, a highly valued pursuit, and those who pursue it are revered. That doesn't mean everybody in India is seeking enlightenment, but it's seen as a virtue. And if one chooses that path, one is choosing a virtuous and valuable path. Unfortunately, in Western societies, if one is seeking enlightenment, it is often viewed as, well, a little bit crazy sometimes, or at least something that most people don't understand. And so, those who are seeking it are not finding typically a benchmark for behavior that one would consider mature. And so it's easy to fall back into the behaviors that society does value, and the distractions that society values. And to name a few, and there's no judgment in any of this, it's just what is. Things such as overindulging in too much intoxicants, whether or toxic substances, whether that be alcohol or drugs, or too much sugar, too much processed food, or things that can be toxic in an emotional and an intellectual sense, such as negative television or movies that make you feel bad or that have dark themes or that have too much violence, an undue amount of unpleasant situations. Society has not yet devalued these things. In fact, they're more valued than at any other time on the planet. And so even though you may be seeking enlightenment, you still feel as though there's value in observing and participating in all of these things. And we're not here to tell you that you shouldn't do it. Our message is never to tell you don't do that. But our message is to say that in the same way that the child learns to self-regulate with chocolate and to not always crave it and to not always choose it, even though it might be available, one who is seeking enlightenment must learn to self-regulate with all of the distractions that would keep you from realizing the higher perspectives, the ripples out on the pond, the more expansive points of view. Because when you are totally focused or largely focused on the 3D world around you and those distractions, it is difficult for and unlikely that the higher perspectives, the perspective of all that is, and your oneness with all that is, will reveal itself. It is more likely that the higher perspectives will reveal themselves when you choose to forego the distractions, or you choose to be very self-regulated about it. This doesn't mean don't ever drink alcohol and don't ever watch a scary movie. But when you do these things, do them with the understanding that they are just temporary things, and that if you make them too much of a permanent thing in your life, you are excluding something much, much greater. You are self-limiting. You are choosing behavior and thought and emotion that is self-limiting, keeping you from something that is much, much bigger and much better than any of those things, really, should you actually come to align with it. And you must just trust that that is so, because in your limited perspective that is focused on all of the distractions of the world, you can't yet really see beyond them. And spiritual maturity is coming to understand that and to say, wait a minute, I trust that there is something higher. I trust that there is something much more expansive, much more magnificent within me, literally within every cell of my body, and it's awaiting my attention. It's awaiting my shining of a light on it, enlightening myself by allowing it to come through, by making space for it to come through, and by not getting in my own way with the distractions.